close your eyes for a moment and imagine a world of hidden glades bathed in moonlight.
Where mischievous creatures play tricks on unsuspecting travelers.
Yeah, and ancient whispers of magic linger in the rustling leaves. That's the world we're about to step into, the world of fairies.
It's a world that has captivated human imagination for centuries, you know? We find tales of these enigmatic beings woven into the folklore of so many cultures.
Particularly across Europe, right?
Yeah, especially across Europe, it speaks to a universal fascination with the unseen, with the magical.
The possibility that something extraordinary might be hiding just beyond our perception.
Right.
We've got a stack of fascinating material here, from historical accounts and folklore analysis to literary examples that bring these creatures to life.
Mm-hmm.
It's like having a treasure map to a realm of enchantment. But before we get lost in the woods, I have to ask the most basic question. What are fairies exactly?
That's where it gets interesting.
Are we talking pixie dust and glittery wings?
There isn't one definitive answer. Their appearance, size, even their powers can change dramatically depending on the story, the region, the time period.
Okay.
They can be human-like, but often with an otherworldly aura.
Uh-huh.
They might be tiny and delicate or surprisingly robust, even armored.
Really?
Yeah, imagine encountering a fairy knight clad in iron guarding a hidden glen.
Wow.
It challenges our preconceived notions of what these creatures should be.
Armored fairies. This already makes me think they're more like mythical warriors than whimsical sprites. But it sounds like there's a lot of variation. What are some of the more specific descriptions we've got here?
Well, for example, on the Orkney Islands, fairies were described as short, dressed in gray, and sometimes, as we mentioned, armored.
Right.
It suggests a more practical, even martial aspect to their nature.
Okay, I'm picturing less flower power and more medieval skirmish now.
Another intriguing detail is the idea that some fairies can shift their size at will, a kind of magical shapeshifting. It's as if they exist between realms, not bound by the same physical laws as humans. And while glittery wings are more of a modern invention, one consistent feature across many tales is their piercing green eyes.
Okay.
A gaze that could be both enchanting and unsettling.
Green eyes, shape-shifting, armored warriors. This is already more complex than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing what they look like is only part of the puzzle. What about their origins? Where do they come from? Are they simply figments of our imagination or something more?
Their origins are a source of much debate,
Right.
which only adds to their allure. Let's look at two of the most compelling theories. One suggests that fairies are demoted angels. Perhaps those who rebelled against a higher power and were cast out, trapped between heaven and earth. It's a fascinating idea. These beings of light, tainted by rebellion, finding a new home in the hidden places of our world.
Fallen angels as fairies. Now that's a story I'd want to hear. It almost makes you wonder what they did to get demoted in the first place. But what's the other theory?
The other theory connects them to pre-Christian beliefs, suggesting that as Christianity spread, older gods and nature spirits were reimagined as fairies.
Oh.
It's like a cultural shift, where ancient deities, rather than vanishing entirely, were absorbed into a new mythology. Imagine powerful forces of nature, once worshipped as gods, now inhabiting the forests and streams as fairies. Their power diminished, but not entirely gone.
So instead of worshiping them, people started fearing them. Or maybe it was a bit of both respect and fear intertwined.
Exactly. And that leads us to another theory, which is closely tied to the Irish, Sidi. You see, the word fairy itself comes from this Irish word, which refers to ancient burial mounds.
Okay.
These mounds were seen as entrances to the other world, a realm where the spirits of the dead resided. So some believe that fairies were actually spirits of the dead, inhabiting these liminal spaces between our world and the next.
That's giving me chills. So encountering a fairy might not be a delightful woodland encounter, but a brush with something from beyond the grave.
It definitely adds a layer of complexity and perhaps even danger to these interactions, and that belief ties into the idea that it was dangerous to eat food in fairyland, just as it was dangerous to eat food in the underworld.
Okay.
It's like a symbolic act of crossing over, becoming bound to that other realm.
Wow, this is getting really intriguing.
Yeah.
But enough about origins for now. Let's talk about what these creatures actually do. Were they all about playful pranks and enchanting dances, or was there a darker side to their nature?
Their behavior. It's as varied as their origins and appearance. They could be mischievous, yes.
Right.
playing pranks on unsuspecting humans, tangling hair into elf locks, stealing small objects, leading travelers astray with their illusions. But they could also be quite dangerous with tales of fairy kidnappings, sudden deaths attributed to their influence, and even illnesses believed to be caused by their nightly revels. There's a sense that they held a powerful and sometimes frightening sway over the mortal world.
So fairies are a bit like nature itself, beautiful and alluring, but also capable of unleashing powerful, unpredictable forces. It sounds like people needed ways to protect themselves from the more troublesome fairy antics. Did they have any charms or rituals to keep them at bay?
Absolutely. Folklore is full of fascinating protective measures against fairies. People believed in the power of wearing clothes inside out, as if to confuse the fairies' perception. The sound of church bells was said to ward them off, as well as certain herbs like St. John's wort. And of course, there's the lucky four-leaf clover, a symbol of protection against fairy mischief.
So if I'm planning a walk in the woods, I should definitely turn my shirt inside out, grab a sprig of St. John's wort, and keep an eye out for four-leaf clovers. Sounds like a plan.
It couldn't hurt, but let's not forget bread. It might seem like an odd charm, but bread as a symbol of hearth and home was seen as a powerful protection against fairies.
So like a portable shield against fairy mischief. I'm starting to think our ancestors were a lot more resourceful than we give them credit for.
Resourceful and perhaps a little bit superstitious. But those superstitions often stemmed from a deep respect for the unseen forces at play in the world. And it wasn't just about personal protection. People went to great lengths to avoid disturbing fairy habitats,
Right.
like those infamous fairy forts and paths. Some even believed that certain trees, especially thorns, were sacred to fairies and shouldn't be disturbed.
Wait, so they'd build their houses around fairy paths. That's serious dedication to good fairy relations. It really shows how ingrained the belief in fairies was in everyday life.
It wasn't just about avoiding their wrath, though. There was also a sense of wonder, a recognition that these creatures, however mischievous or dangerous, were part of the natural order and deserved respect.
Right.
It's a perspective that perhaps we've lost touch with in our modern world.
I'm starting to think we could learn a thing or two from our ancestors about coexisting with the unseen. Before we get too philosophical, I'm curious about those brownies. They seem like the most well-known of the household fairies. What were their quirks?
Brownies were generally helpful creatures, known for doing chores around the house or farm, but they had a strong sense of independence. Offering them clothes was considered a grave insult.
Really?
They were also known to abandon homes if they overheard complaints or even compliments.
So they were like super sensitive roommates who did chores but couldn't handle any feedback.
That's one way to put it. It speaks to their ambiguous nature. Helpful but easily offended, existing in that liminal space between the human and fairy worlds. And there were other less benevolent household spirits, like the boggarts, known for their mischievous and sometimes malicious pranks.
It's like a whole unseen ecosystem of creatures, each with their own personality and agenda.
And navigating that ecosystem required a certain level of awareness and respect. Even something as simple as looking directly at a fairy was considered taboo.
Okay.
It was seen as a violation of their privacy, an intrusion to their world.
I guess staring is rude, even in the fairy world.
More than rude, it could be dangerous. It's like acknowledging their presence too directly, inviting their attention in a way that might not be welcome. There's a story about a farmer whose crops were being magically threshed by fairies even after the harvest was done.
Really?
Turns out they were stealing from the neighbors, leaving the poor farmer with a moral dilemma.
What?
Accept the fairy-assisted productivity or address the unethical source of the bounty.
That's a tough spot to be in. Choosing between fairy-assisted productivity and the ethics of stolen goods.
It highlights the complexity of human-fairy relations,
Right.
the delicate balance between benefiting from their magic and navigating the potential consequences. And sometimes that balance tipped in favor of the fairies, especially when it came to those believed to have a special connection to them, like the Scottish millers. Millers, with their mastery over the elements, fire, water, the wind that drove their mills, were often viewed with suspicion.
As if they'd struck some bargain with the fairies to control these forces.
Exactly. Imagine these solitary figures working late into the night, the rhythmic churning of the millstones adding to their mystique. It's easy to see how those whispers of fairy collaboration might arise.
So a miller's ability to harness the forces of nature made them suspect in the eyes of some. It's like they were the original tech wizards, wielding a power that others couldn't quite grasp. Did that belief ever work to their advantage?
Absolutely. Take the story of John Fraser, a Scottish miller. He claimed to have seen fairies struggling to operate his mill at night, and being a kind soul helped them out, his reward, a steady supply of magically replenishing meal.
Wow.
Now, whether he actually encountered fairies or was simply shrewdly playing on local superstitions to explain his abundant grain, we'll never know, but it's a great example of how folklore could be interwoven with everyday life.
That's a smart Miller, using folklore to his advantage. It makes you wonder how many other stories were embellished or even fabricated to explain the unexplainable. But this idea of knowing a fairy's name giving you power over them, that's something that pops up a lot in these tales. It's almost chilling, isn't it?
It is. It speaks to this primal belief that names hold inherent power, that even magical beings are vulnerable to those who possess such knowledge.
Right.
But it also suggests a potential for reciprocity. Knowing a fairy's name might not always be about control. It could be a path to receiving gifts or favors, forging a kind of alliance. It adds another layer of complexity to this already intricate relationship between humans and fairies.
This is all reminding me of those stories where fairies are blamed for illnesses or misfortunes, especially when children were born with abnormalities. It seems like a very human response to project our fears onto the unknown.
It is. Before modern medicine, it was all too common to attribute the inexplicable to supernatural forces. Fairies, with their association with magic and the unseen, became easy scapegoats for things people couldn't understand or control. If a child was born different, if crops failed, if someone suddenly took ill, it was easier to blame the fairies than to face the harsh realities of a world they couldn't fully comprehend.
It's tragic, but it also highlights how deeply intertwined fairies were with everyday life, for better or worse. They were blamed for misfortune, but they're also credited with good harvests, sudden strokes of luck, or even the inspiration for great works of art. It's like they represented both the light and shadow sides of human experience.
You put it perfectly. And that duality is reflected in the stories and legends that have sprung up around them. Tales that have been passed down through generations, shaping our understanding of these enigmatic beings.
All right, let's move from theory to narrative. I'm ready to hear some of these captivating tales. What are some of the most iconic stories or legends that feature fairies? I'm especially curious about those that blur the lines between gods, ancestors, and the fairy realm itself.
Let's start with the Tuatha De Danann, the ancient, supernaturally gifted people of Irish mythology. Imagine a race skilled in magic, art, and warfare, often associated with those ancient burial mounds, the city that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
They're often depicted as tall and beautiful, radiating an otherworldly aura. But here's the thing. Are they gods, ancestors, or fairies? The lines are deliberately blurred, making them all the more intriguing.
So are they powerful beings who retreated to the fairy mounds after being defeated by invaders? Or are they something else entirely? It's like they embody that sense of mystery and otherworldliness that we associate with the fairy realm.
Exactly. And those burial mounds, those entrances to the otherworld, add another layer of intrigue. It's like the veil between our world and theirs is thin in those places, allowing for interaction, for stories to be exchanged, for magic to seep into our reality.
I'm picturing those rolling hills of Ireland, dotted with ancient mounds, each one a potential portal to a realm of wonder and danger. And the fact that the term AOC, people of the fairy mounds, is still used in Ireland today to refer to fairies just goes to show how deeply rooted these beliefs are. It's as if the fairies are woven into the very fabric of the land itself.
You've captured it perfectly. Now, if we to journey across the sea to Scotland, we encounter the Scottish Sea. Equally fascinating, equally elusive. One 17th century minister, Reverend Robert Kirk, described them as beings of middle nature between man and angel with light, changeable bodies, almost like condensed clouds.
Wow, that's a vivid description. They sound more ethereal, less earthly than some other fairy depictions. It's like they exist in a state of perpetual transformation, shifting and swirling with the mists and winds of the Scottish Highlands.
Kirk believed they could appear and disappear at will, their forms shaped by the very spirits that animated them. He saw them as intelligent, capable of great magic and wielding influence over the natural world.
Okay.
But he also acknowledged the darker side of their nature, warning of their potential to mislead, trick, and even harm those who cross their paths.
Okay, this is where my inner skeptic kicks in. Did people really believe these creatures existed, or were they more like metaphors for the unknown, for the forces of nature they couldn't explain?
Beliefs varied, of course,
Yeah.
but remember those protective charms we talked about earlier?
Right.
Those weren't just whimsical traditions, they were born out of a genuine concern about the potential harm fairies could inflict. It speaks to a deep-seated fear of the unknown. a recognition that there were forces at play in the world that humans couldn't fully comprehend or control.
I guess it's easy to dismiss fairy lore as mere superstition. But when you consider the context of the time, the lack of scientific explanations for so many things, it's no wonder people attributed certain events to supernatural forces.
Exactly. Fairies became a way to explain everything from sudden illnesses and disappearances to mischievous pranks and unexplained occurrences. They were the embodiment of the unpredictable, the inexplicable, the forces that could disrupt the order of everyday life.
Speaking of unexplained occurrences, we can't forget the Cottingley fairies. Those photographs caused quite a stir back in the day, even fooling some prominent figures. It's a fascinating example of how our desire to believe, especially in a world increasingly dominated by science and reason, can sometimes lead us down unexpected paths.
It certainly does. It reminds us that the human imagination is a powerful thing, capable of blurring the lines between fantasy and reality, especially when we yearn for something more, something magical to break through the mundane.
It's like a collective longing for enchantment, a refusal to let go of the possibility that something extraordinary might still be hiding just beyond our perception.
And fairies have played a significant role in shaping that longing. Think about their presence in literature. From those medieval romances with their knights errant and fairy enchantresses, to the whimsical tales of Victorian England. They've captivated readers for centuries, offering a glimpse into a world where anything is possible, where magic is real, and where the boundaries of reality are constantly shifting.
All right, let's talk about fairies in literature. They've popped up in so many stories, each one adding to their mystique and complexity. Where should we begin this literary journey?
Let's begin with those medieval romances. Tales of chivalry and courtly love, often intertwined with encounters with the supernatural. Fairies frequently appear as enchantresses, fetchers of immense power and allure, who test the knight's virtue and challenge their perceptions of reality. Think of the fairy lady in the tale of Sir Launfal. She offers him her love, but with a dangerous prohibition attached. It's a classic fairy tale trope. A gift with strings attached, a test of human character against the allure of the magical.
It's like the fairy realm itself is a test, a trial by fire for those who dare to venture into its depths, and the stakes are high. Disobeying a fairy's command could lead to misfortune, madness, even death. But it's not always about punishment. Sometimes it's about a kind of mystical education, a journey of transformation.
You're right, and that transformative power of the fairy realm is beautifully depicted in the ballad of Thomas the Rhymer. Thomas, a poet, is taken to Elfland, where he spends 7 years in the company of the Queen of Fairies. When he returns to the mortal world, he's gifted with the ability to see the future, to speak truth to power.
Hmm.
It's as if his time in the fairy realm has unlocked a hidden potential, granting him a unique perspective on the world and its workings.
It's like a glimpse behind the veil, a taste of forbidden knowledge that forever changes those who experience it. But there's always a price to pay, isn't there? Think about the Irish myth of Oisin. After spending centuries in the land of youth, a realm of perpetual beauty and joy, he returns to a world where time has marched on without him. The moment he dismounts his magical steed, he ages instantly, becoming a withered old man.
It's a poignant reminder that the fairy realm operates on a different timescale, that venturing into its depths can have unforeseen consequences. It's a tale of the bittersweet nature of immortality, the allure of the eternal juxtaposed against the inevitability of change and decay in the mortal world.
These stories are full of warnings, but they're also incredibly captivating. You can see why they've endured for centuries. They tap into something deep within us, a fascination with the unknown, a longing for something beyond the ordinary.
Exactly. And let's not forget the deceptive nature of fairy magic, perfectly embodied in the concept of fairy gold. It appears as genuine treasure but quickly transforms into worthless trinkets. A reminder that things are not always as they seem in the world of fairies.
It's like a fairy illusion, designed to trick those who are greedy or easily fooled. It makes me think of all those tales of mortals being lured into the fairy realm, only to discover that time moves differently there, or that their fairy lovers are not what they seem. It's a potent reminder of the dangers of being seduced by beauty and enchantment without considering the potential consequences.
You've hit upon a crucial element of these tales. They're not just whimsical stories, they're cautionary tales. Warnings about the dangers of straying from the familiar, of being too trusting, too eager for something that promises to fulfill our desires.
Hmm.
But even with those warnings, there's a sense of wonder, of possibility that shines through. Perhaps it's that blend of danger and enchantment that keeps us coming back to these stories, generation after generation.
I think you're right. There's something both terrifying and exhilarating about the prospect of encountering a fairy. It's like stepping into a realm where the rules are different, where the impossible becomes possible. And that's incredibly appealing, even if it comes with a healthy dose of risk.
And speaking of risk, let's not forget about those tales of fairy ointment. These stories often involve mortal women summoned to attend fairy births or kidnapped human mothers. They're given an ointment for the baby's eyes, but if they accidentally apply it to their own eyes, they gain the ability to see the fairy realm for what it truly is.
It's like a glimpse behind the curtain, revealing the true nature of things, the hidden workings of the fairy world.
But that glimpse comes at a price. The women are often punished for their unintended sight, either blinded in the eye that saw the truth, or ostracized from the human world for their knowledge of the unseen. It's a reminder that some things are better left unseen, that knowledge can be both a blessing and a curse.
It's like the ancient Greek myth of Psyche, who is forbidden to look upon her divine lover, Eros. The moment she gives in to curiosity, the relationship is shattered. It's a powerful theme that runs through so many stories. The danger of seeking forbidden knowledge, of disrupting the delicate balance between the seen and the unseen.
These stories remind us that the fairy realm is not to be trifled with. It's a place of immense power, where the rules are different, the consequences unpredictable. And while we might be drawn to its beauty and enchantment, we must always proceed with caution, respecting its boundaries and acknowledging the potential for both wonder and peril.
You've painted such a vivid picture of this world, the ancient myths, the cautionary tales, the glimpses of magic and danger. But we've only just begun to explore the vast tapestry of fairy legends. We haven't even touched upon the captivating world of Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, or delved into the specific types of fairies that inhabit these tales.
I'm eager to explore those realms with you. From the mischievous sprites of Shakespeare's forest to the chilling tales of changelings and the enduring belief in modern-day fairy sightings, there's so much more to uncover. Perhaps we can even find some unexpected connections between these different fairy traditions, threads that weave together a rich and complex tapestry of belief and imagination.
I'm ready for the next chapter of this adventure.
Let's talk about specific types of fairies. We've touched on brownies and boggarts, those household spirits, but there are so many others, each with their unique characteristics and roles in folklore. And if we're talking about those that truly capture the imagination, we can't overlook the changelings.
Oh, the changelings. Just the word sends shivers down my spine. Imagine the fear parents must have felt back then, suspecting that their child had been swapped with a fairy substitute. A sickly infant exhibiting strange behavior not quite themselves. It's a chilling thought, especially when you consider the limited understanding of childhood illnesses, developmental differences that existed back then.
It's heartbreaking and eerie at the same time. Were these changeling tales a way to cope with infant mortality? With the pain of losing a child or seeing them suffer in ways that couldn't be explained or treated?
Right.
It's certainly one interpretation, a way to make sense of the inexplicable tragedies that families faced. And then there's stories about fairies abducting adults as well, adding another layer of fear to this already complex relationship with the unseen.
It's like this underlying fear that the fairy realm could intrude upon our world at any moment, snatching away those we love and leaving behind a haunting substitute. It's no wonder people developed all sorts of rituals and charms to protect themselves. But what gets me is how specific the folklore is about preventing fairy abductions. Like, why would putting a loaf of bread in a baby's cradle ward off a changeling? It seems so random.
It might seem random to us now, but symbolically, bread represents hearth and home, the everyday world.
Right.
Perhaps it was seen as a way to ground the child in the human realm, making them less appealing to the fairies. It's like setting up a magical boundary with something as simple as a loaf of bread.
I love that. It's like those old wives' tales that your grandmother might tell you, a mix of practicality and superstition. But it makes you wonder if those superstitions weren't just born out of fear, but also out of a deep respect for the power of the fairy realm.
You've hit on an important point. It wasn't just about fearing fairies. It was about acknowledging their existence, respecting their power, and trying to coexist with them in a world where the boundaries between the seen and the unseen were often blurred. And that respect is evident in the way people interacted with their environment, the way they avoided disturbing certain places or cutting down specific trees.
It's a perspective that we seem to have lost touch with. We've become so focused on controlling and dominating our environment that we've forgotten the importance of respecting the forces that we don't fully understand. Maybe a little bit of that old-fashioned fairy fear wouldn't be such a bad thing after all. But speaking of the modern world, I'm curious to know if there are any present-day beliefs or practices related to fairies. Have they completely faded into myth and legend, or do people still hold on to some of those old traditions?
It's remarkable how fairy beliefs have evolved and adapted over time. While some might consider them mere superstition, there are still those who believe in the existence of fairies or feel a connection to these magical beings. You see it in art, literature, and even in some spiritual practices.
It's like the human need to believe in something beyond the tangible, the rational, never truly goes away. We seek out those glimmers of magic, whether it's in a fairy tale, a beautiful landscape, or a moment of unexpected wonder.
And those glimpses of magic might be closer than we think. Consider the fairy doors of Ann Arbor, Michigan. These tiny doors, lovingly installed in local buildings, spark the imaginations of children who believe they are entrances to fairy homes.
That's adorable. It's a reminder that even in a modern, technology-driven world, there's still room for whimsy, for a belief in the extraordinary. It's like these little doors are keeping a spark of magic alive, inviting us to see the world through the eyes of a child.
And for some, that connection to fairies goes beyond whimsy. There are individuals and groups who believe in the spiritual significance of fairies, seeing them as guardians of nature or as beings who can offer guidance and inspiration. They might leave offerings in the forest, meditate in places believed to have fairy energy, or even incorporate fairy imagery and lore into their spiritual practices.
It's a beautiful way to connect with the natural world, to find meaning and wonder in the everyday. It reminds us that spirituality isn't just about organized religion or ancient texts. It's about finding a sense of connection, of awe, of something larger than ourselves. And for some people, that connection is found through the belief in fairies.
It's like those old traditions have found a new expression in the modern world, adapting to our changing needs and beliefs. We may not leave out bowls of cream for brownies anymore, but the underlying human need to connect with the magical, the unseen, remains strong. It's a testament to the enduring power of belief and the resilience of the human imagination.
We've covered so much ground in this exploration of fairies, their origins, their diverse types and behaviors, the protective charms used to ward them off, their captivating presence in stories and legends. We've delved into ancient myths and modern-day practices, uncovering a rich tapestry of belief and imagination. It feels like we've just scratched the surface of a truly fascinating subject.
And that's the wonderful thing about folklore and mythology. There's always more to uncover, more layers to peel back, more stories to tell. The world of fairies, with its blend of enchantment and danger, continues to fascinate and inspire us. It reminds us of the power of imagination and the enduring human need to believe in something beyond the ordinary.
I think we've left our listeners with plenty to ponder. The origins of fairies, the truth behind the legends, and perhaps even a glimmer of hope that a little bit of fairy magic might still exist in the world. Who knows, maybe they'll even start leaving out a slice of bread before venturing into a moonlit forest, just in case.
I wouldn't blame them. And as we conclude our journey into this enchanting realm, I encourage you to keep exploring, keep believing, and allow your own curiosity to lead you to new discoveries. The world is full of wonder if we only know where to look.
Beautifully said. Until next time, may your paths be filled with wonder, and may you always carry a bit of that fairy magic in your heart.